Was I not live the entire time? Hold on. So this again leads back to the point where uh, I just realized maybe I made a mistake. I don't think I was live. I was talking for like 15 minutes. Oh wait, I was I not live the entire time? Hold on. So this again leads back to the point where oh, I can hear just myself. Realized. Oh, that's not good. I think I am live now. Okay, I didn't realize that I was not live. I pressed go live, but I think it was only in preview mode. Wait, let me just double check. I wasn't live. It only started a minute ago. Okay, I will repeat myself. Uh, so today it's gonna be sort of a different stream. Okay. I see my mom says I'm live now. Perfect. I had some. I I pressed go live and I forgot that it was still stuck in preview mode and it was not really streaming. So anyway, uh, this stream, like I said, is going to be slightly different. It's going to be politics, very different from the usual content that I make, which is usually horror games or just gaming in general. And I wanted to talk about politics because I feel like, of course, given what's happening in the last few weeks in India regarding the student protests, we I feel like there is a lack of political sort of commentators in terms of live streaming because we have journalists, we have reporters, we have a lot of independent journalists and also some comedians like Kunal Kamra that do good journalism and talk a lot about politics. But I feel like the Indian live streaming space is heavily dominated by entertainment or gaming. So I'm trying to break into streaming politics or make streaming politics more palpable in India, in the Indian YouTube space. Okay, anyway, I spent like 15 minutes talking to no one before I realized I was not live. So I'm gonna uh, repeat myself, like I said. So today I think I will briefly go over what I think are the issues with the Indian education system, um, which basically is tied to the NEET scandal, and then the unfortunate lives that were lost, the student lives, 22 if I'm not wrong, and then the aftermath where you have the CJP, the inception of the CJP, the protests, and ending up with the resignation of the education minister. And I'll also talk a little bit about what it means, what this movement means to me, or what I think it means in general, and what it should mean going forward, or what should be done going forward. So, to start off, I wanted to showcase the National Education Policy. So, this is a policy document which was, I think, it has been in under conception from 1980s or 1990s, and I think the document of 2020 creates the biggest sort of change, a total revamp of the education system. And I think I'll highlight a few points about this policy here, and I'll also talk about maybe some shortcomings and the major pain points of this policy. So let's go through quickly. Yeah, I've just highlighted a few sentences where the main goal again here is to sort of reduce the inequality when it comes to education, because I feel like currently in our education system, the inequality or sort of classism that exists in education is majorly due to privatization and underfunding. Because if you look at government schools, most government schools are, or all, maybe I can't say all, most government schools are underfunded, understaffed, and these private entities have sort of taken over, whether it comes to normal pre-university education or even in high school, where you have people preparing for exams. You have these massive sort of ed tech mafias which have completely taken over, where people it's so bad that now students stop going to normal schools and only enroll in these sort of ed tech firms which prepare you purely for these engineering or medical exams. NEET is one of them, is a medical entrance test. So I think that is one major issue where heavy or this aggressive privatization leads to a very stark inequality in terms of access, accessibility, or just sort of some sort of classism. Because if you have two systems where one or two institutes, where one institute has poor infrastructure, uh, poorly paid teachers, not enough infrastructure, and you have the other side where you have, which are the private entities, which of course have a lot of funding, and which comes from the parents, from high fees, and naturally they have a much higher quality of infrastructure, the quality of teaching, and so on. And obviously, people who are privileged enough to be able to attend these schools will receive a much better education, whether it's in terms of just pure quality of education or infrastructure wise as well. So I think that is one big disadvantage that we have right now. So the national education policy, I think there was, yeah, oh yeah, they have these fundamental principles, and most of these are like very quality, very high quality, let's say, these principles. But as we see from 2020 when it was introduced to now, there have been a lot of criticism of how these policies will be implemented or how these can't be implemented, and so on. But if you just glance over these fundamentals, they are very solid. Trying to exacerbate again, like I said, or reduce exacerbation of inequality. And I think they have this figure which is also very informative. And here, one stark difference from what existed before and what they're trying to achieve is sort of this centralization before the ages of 6 to 16. So previously here they say that it was sort of a black box, which is like these kindergartens or play schools, and they want to sort of reform that into something more central, something more universal across India. I think, if I'm not wrong, someone said that this is trying to model itself after the US education system. But anyway, this is it's a long document. I think I had one part that I also wanted to show. Was Yeah. So one of the things that we will look at also in the article I have open is about how much the government spends on education. So like we said, there are a lot of optimistic goals that we have also in this policy for Indian education, or to revamp the education system. But unfortunately, the like they say here, the expenditure on education in India is not close to what was recommended, which is 6% of our GDP. And according to this Forbes article here, you see that here they show you how much India spends as a percent of its GDP in different fiscal years on education and health. And here we see that the recommended target, or the target to achieve, was 6%, and it has been 6% from 1968, and it's only at around 2.9%, or and in fact it's decreasing to 2.7 in the last 6 years. So that is also something to note, that we are way behind the sort of target that we had in 1981, 1968, sorry. And another point here is, you see that among when we compare how much India spends on education to other countries like South Africa and Brazil, uh, we are we are almost less than half of what they spend, and that is also something important to note. And you see also other BRICS countries listed here, and also South Asia is sort of ahead in terms of its spending on education. So I think this sort of highlights how there is a need for more government spending on education, a higher budget allocation to education, which is not being met. And also, if it was met, it would make implementation of the NEP much easier, NEP 2020. So that was it for sort of a very quick background on the Indian education system. Uh, Maybe I should also talk about the yeah. So this is a report from 2024, and this sort of talks about the level of education of students in different grades. So, for example, I think one notable example was here when it comes to reading. So, this is reading comprehension in students, and they say that reading letters, words, and simple paragraphs are considered, let's say, standard one difficulty. And if a student can read a story by themselves, it's standard two. And you see here that students of grade 5, so in 5th grade, the proportion of students in government schools who can read a standard 2 text, so they are in grade 5, and the number of people who can read a text from grade 2 is only 44%. It was 44% in 2018. It fell because of COVID to 38.5, and it recovered to 44.8. But it is still so less than half of students in grade 5 in government schools can read text from grade 2. So this is also this is like a very good indicator that something is seriously wrong in the way the education system works. And also you see that when it comes to private schools, it is still not very high. So privatization also doesn't necessarily mean better learning outcomes. So here you see for children in grade 5 in private schools, it was 65% in 2018. So children in 5th grade in private schools, only 65% of them could read a text from grade 2. It went down again, of course, because of COVID. And then in 2024, it was still 59.3%. So still slightly more than half of the students in private schools in standard 5 can read a standard 2 level of text. So this is also, I think, something very important to note and understand. Yeah, I won't go over the others, but I think my point is should be clear. Then next, I think here, this is another sort of analysis of expenditure on education. Um, but okay, this is also a maybe not that interesting right now to go through to get bogged down in the details. Okay, another point when it comes to the Indian education system is the number of schools. So we have a lot of schools that are at the preschool or kindergarten level. I'm trying to find. Um, there was, yeah. So the number of schools that we have at primary level is very high, but then the drop off is very significant. So when you go to upper primary and secondary schools, it drops off significantly, which means that uh, the access to education at different levels is also very unequal. So you might have thousands of schools that are at the primary level, but if you don't have schools in the secondary or upper primary levels, usually I think this happens more in rural areas where there's a high probability that in the rural area you have a primary school but no upper primary or secondary school. So just the lack of schools at these levels, especially in rural areas, is also very concerning. So that was for this. I think this is another document that talks about uh, yeah, it talks about the education system in general in India, and it's also a very good report. Uh, it does a policy analysis, if I'm not wrong. Okay, I think I was trying to also show something else. Um, yeah, maybe this is also interesting. The Indian budget for 2026. I have to look it up. Um, Budget at a glance. I think it was this, if I'm not wrong. Uh, yeah, this one. And here I think on page, so this is the official budget at a glance document from the government, and we'll see, because I spoke about oh, this doesn't have the page that I was looking for. Anyway, the point I was trying to make is even in the expenditure that the government does, because we spoke about how much percent of the GDP of India is allocated for education, and the goal was 6%. We are nowhere close to it. We are at 2.5, 2.7%. We are the lowest among all other countries in South Asia, or the average in South Asia, and also the lowest in the BRICS, sort of the countries members of BRICS. Um, and also, the reason I wanted to bring up the budget is to show, maybe I have a screenshot somewhere, that even in terms of expenditure, education is only about 2 or 3%. Let me, I am unable to open this. Okay, never mind. I can't seem to open the file. That's fine. Okay. Um, yeah, so that was about the sort of a short um, discussion on the education system, on the reforms that have been made or that we are trying to make to the education system. And now I think I'll dwell a little bit on what happened with the protests, and I'll start off with a background on the sort of two big exams that we have. We have the JEE, which is the Joint Entrance Exam, uh, and we have NEET, which is the, I think, National Eligibility Entrance Test. So these are two exams in India, um, which are the classic engineer versus doctor sort of career path that people take. And the point is that these exams operate at a huge scale. There are, I think, millions, if I'm not wrong, of students that write these exams every year, and for only a handful of seats or positions. So it is extremely stressful, and this ties back to my point about these edtech mafias, where a lot of students prepare for these exams from 3 or 4 years before they give the exam. And when I mean prepare, it's really, it can be as severe as, like I said, completely abandoning the traditional schooling system and only going to these edtech classes or coaching centers, and they only go to schools to give exams. So it is really, really centered towards passing the exam and getting a seat in a, in a good university. So it is extremely stressful. Students dedicate a lot of time and effort. PTSD, yeah, exactly. JEE as well gives me a lot of PTSD, just the amount of stress that you have. So students have an immense amount of stress when they are preparing for the exam and when they give the exam. So when a paper like this, like whether it's JEE or NEET, when they get leaked, what happens is all the students have to give the exam again, and you can imagine how mentally damaging and sort of debilitating it must be, that you prepare for so long for an exam, you sacrifice your years of your youth, um, your high school. You forget about the sort of traditional schooling life that you should have as a child in high school and only focus on exams, and then it's all for nothing. You have to give it again. Also, not to forget that a lot of students actually start studying for the exams really early. Yeah, that's true. Generally, people do it in high school, but indeed, especially these edtechs, I hate them so much for this. They advertise, they sell their classes to parents, and indeed they do it as early as even middle school. So from 6th or 7th grade, parents are sort of targeted by these edtech firms and sort of coerced into sending their child to these classes. Otherwise, they're gonna be left behind compared to their peers. So indeed, that also happens. So when such an exam paper is leaked, it it is very clear and very natural to see how much stress it puts on the students giving these exams, and that is why this year I think when the paper was leaked, let me just bring it up. 2026. Um, I think I'm trying to find the number of students. Okay, it was 11 or 13. So here is an article. This is from 19th of June, and there were 13 students that have, at least as of this date, had taken their lives due to this exam paper being leaked. And of course, this is extremely serious and a very grave issue. And this is what sort of this was one of the reasons that sort of started this whole protest and agitation, which I'll talk about. So, keeping this in mind, I also want to show where the Cockroach Janta Party sort of started. Do I have their website? CJP. Yeah, it's here. So this website that you see here is is a website by this sort of movement, let's say, called the Cockroach Janta Party, which sort of loosely translates to uh, cockroach people or something, or yeah, it's based on a comment that was made by the Chief Justice of India. Let me bring that up. Um, yeah, the Chief Justice of India, Surya Kant, he called the unemployed youth of India he called them as cockroaches or parasites, and that sort of really led to this. It was like a trigger that led to this movement where you had Abhijit Dipke. Let me bring up the timeline. Yeah, this is a timeline by the Hindu. I think it's very concise, very good. So you see, on May 15th of this year, the Chief Justice of India sort of called the unemployed youth and the problems that they were discussing about of high unemployment in India. Even you have people who are graduates with degrees who are just unable to find jobs and have to resort to sort of yeah, like I think there were examples of people doing deliveries or driving Ubers and so on. And yeah, that when that is the context and you hear someone or you hear the Chief Justice of India call you lazy and parasite and cockroach, it really it makes sense why people are outraged. And yeah, as it says on the 16th of May, Abhijit Dipke, he was in the US. He was studying in the US, and he had some ties to the Aam Aadmi Party, which he has publicly acknowledged and said that he had left the Aam Aadmi Party long before this movement started. But indeed, he started a Twitter sort of movement or a Twitter thread which said that what if all cockroaches come together, and that sort of snowballed into what we see now with the protests. And I think some notable events were yeah, they banned the Twitter handle to try. The government of India banned the Twitter handle when it gained large sort of popularity, because you rarely see such a movement get so much following online. If I'm not wrong, it was what 22 million followers on Instagram in less than 2 weeks. Yeah, 20 more than 20 million followers on Instagram in less than 2 weeks, and it really was a signal that something this movement is really picking up pace, picking up speed, and that's why the government tried to ban the Twitter handle. They created a new Twitter handle, and yeah, they went to High Court, and I think eventually the ban was lifted. But it's this is where it starts to tell you how the government is trying to sort of suppress or yeah, dismiss this movement before it gets too big, which they failed to do. I think some few other important parts were, yeah, on June 28th. I think if I scroll down, June 28th, yeah, June 28th, you had Sonam Wangchuk, who who is a activist from Ladakh, and let me just bring up his Wikipedia maybe. Yeah, so this guy, he is a activist from Ladakh, and I've heard disputing claims, but from what I understood, he was the inspiration for the main character of Three Idiots. And I know recently in an interview or a conference, Amir Khan has said that it was not completely not based on him, which I was very surprised. But anyway, he has contributed a lot towards environmentalism in Ladakh and also for education. And on 28th of June, he went on a hunger strike at Jantar Mantar, which is a public sort of site in Delhi, New Delhi. And after that, I think it sort of gained a lot of pace and a lot of traction. So you see that after he started the hunger strike, um, you had oh yeah, you you had on-site movement or on-site mobilization of students after the hunger strike started, and it really became it started to become very big, or started to gain a lot of momentum. Um, some other things important here were, Yes, on 18th of July, after 20 days, he was removed forcibly from the protest site by the Delhi police. And one thing to note here is because I think there was like a PIL that was filed that said that the Delhi police is responsible for the health and safety of Sonam Wangchuk. And when he was removed forcibly to a hospital, which he did not consent to. He did not want to go to be in that hospital, and they didn't let him leave. So it was like he was placed on some sort of a detention in that hospital, which he did not want to be in that hospital. He wanted to go to some other hospital. I don't remember the name, but the Delhi police didn't allow it. So that's what happened on 18th of July, and 20th of July was the, I think, the peak, the biggest sort of mass mobilization of students. I think around, people say, was it 50,000 students that marched to Jantar Mantar, and they started this sort of march with the slogan of Sansad Chalo, which means let's go to the parliament. And this was really the peak of the moment, I think, where you really saw how important it is, or how big or how strong the youth of India can be when it comes to protests, or when it comes to demanding accountability. It's important to know that this protest was overwhelmingly peaceful, and the Delhi police sort of subjected the students to a lot of police brutality. It started with lathi charge, which is like these sticks which they used to hit the students. Tear gas was used, and also there were, I think, one or two cases of students that one student is blind in one eye because of pellet guns that were used by the RAF, the Rapid Action Force, which was working in collaboration with the Delhi police. So, one of the things that came out of this protest of 20th of July was the police brutality and the excessive force that the Delhi police and the RAF used against an overwhelmingly peaceful protest, or overwhelmingly peaceful crowd. And another point, I guess, here to realize is, even if the protesters were violent, which they were not, it was overwhelmingly peaceful. But even if there was a violent mob, the sort of directives or the way it is supposed to be handled is to use minimal force, and only, even if a lathi charge is to be done, it has to be done in such a way that it just disperses the crowd, and never and always below the waist. We have examples where protesters were hit in the head. You see blood coming from their head, and you have a lot of video evidence that shows the Delhi police and the RAF completely disregarding this sort of policy to handle a mob, a violent mob, which it was not a violent mob. So that is one thing. Another thing under police brutality was the RAF. They, all of them, had their name tags removed. So it's very clear that it's some sort of a command, or some sort of an order that has come from above, that's telling all these RAF soldiers to remove their name tags, and they were not responding to why they did that. So it sort of became this strange act of people, or the police committing these crimes without their names, so sort of without any accountability. So that was also one important issue. Another thing with the police brutality, or part of the police brutality, was there were a lot of these. Similar to the RAF removing their name tags, there were also a lot of goons, in civilian clothes. So these were people in civilian clothes, armed with lathis, and very clearly being protected by the police. So it was very clear that, because this is illegal, you cannot have you can, of course, it is possible for police to be in civil clothes, but you cannot have armed policemen or armed people in civilian clothes. And it's precisely to be held accountable that you have to be identifiable whenever you are, uh, let's say, armed with lathi, for example. And that was not the case in terms of the RAF removing their name tags, and also these people in civilian clothes. So that was about the police brutality. And I think the bigger question here about the police brutality is the Home Minister is answerable to whatever has happened on 20th of July. Of course, the individual policemen or the RAF individual members are also responsible, but it is very clear that there has, or it seems as if there has been some sort of a um, sort of order or some sort of structural instruction that was given from above. So the Home Minister has to be answerable to this, and he has to respond as to why this happened, what caused it, and what action is going to be taken against it. Because one of the demands of the protesters was to take action against the policemen who committed crimes on camera. And it's not just brutal crimes; it's also extremely sort of there were one or two cases of harassment as well of these police officers. Uh, the language used by some of the students on their posters were unacceptable. Unless this is condemned, and it will become a fashion to use language. Yes, I've seen a lot of posters and a lot of slogans that were sort of derogatory, but I think the bigger issue is not that whether this language should be used or not. I think what we should take back from this is how much anger and frustration the youth has. So, of course, there is no um, sort of skeletal structure that, oh, this is the slogan that has to be used every time, or this language must be used every time you protest. But indeed, well, I think it's understood based on the fact that the students are extremely frustrated, and the sheer anger that the students have comes out in these ways. And also, there was when I was talking about police brutality, but there was also cases of students or the protesters hitting back to the police. And it's not just me saying it; it's also the stance of the members of the spokesperson of CJP, that action must be taken also against these protesters who were violent to the policemen. So that is one demand which I think I'll talk about later, because there was a press conference, I think, yesterday, and there was no mention of action against the police for brutality, and also the protesters who were violent towards, whether it's the media or whether it's the police. And Also about the media, it was again very clear in the protests that you see that again, just the frustration and anger that the students have against the Godi media, which is media completely captured by the Modi government and Ambani and Adani, for example. Anger should not lead to use of vulgar language. Yes, I guess, but in my opinion, I think that is sort of irrelevant. I don't think if someone uses vulgar language or not is a big issue or a big deal. I think it's okay if someone uses vulgar language to sort of emphasize their frustration and anger. Of course, it's not the ideal way to conduct things. Ideally, everybody does everything in a very uh, uh, sort of friendly or non-vulgar manner. But yeah, I think it's not really important to me or in my perspective. Next, I was talking about how the Home Minister has to be responsible or answerable uh, to the police brutality. Yeah, so that was about police brutalities that happened on the 20th of July. And next, I think, yeah, one more thing I think to understand, which is very important, is that this protest is not just about NEET or the education system. Um, of course, that was one of the main points, that the loss of lives of students in the NEET exam, accountability from the education minister. That was one of the main points. But as you can see from whether it's interviews of students at the protest or whether it's the slogans that they were using, it was not only about NEET. It was in a general dissatisfaction and anger towards the administration or the way the administration is run, because you had slogans against the BJP, you had slogans against Narendra Modi, you had slogans against Nitin Gadkari, you had slogans against the media, the sort of Godi media. So I think that is also something to be noted, that this movement, although it may have started with, or one of the main focuses of this movement might have been the NEET exam or the education system, but I think it's much bigger than that, and you can see it with the way students are sort of showing their opinions or sharing their opinions about different aspects of the administration of the system, and not just with NEET. Uh, so that was another point. And yeah, another good sort of thing that came out from this, of course, the biggest positive that I take from this is that change is possible, and I am very sort of proud of how students or the youth from my generation is taking it to the streets to protest against the government, to tell them that you can't push us over. You have to listen to us. You are accountable. And I think I skipped it in the timeline, but after the protests on July 20th, of course, there were people coming in from different parties, different political parties. Then you also had, I think at some point, there was a discussion with JP Nadda, who's the union minister. And there's also another point to note there. When the members of the CJP went to visit JP Nadda, they were treated sort of like not seriously, because first of all, their phones were taken away, and secondly, they were made to wait for hours. And finally, when they could meet with the minister, he told them that, sorry, there's nothing I can do. You have to take it up with, sorry, I need to take it up with someone else and get back to you. And while this was happening, there were police brutalities that were being committed when the spokesperson of the CJP was not at the protest site. So that is also something to note, because after that happened, the CJP leaders said that we will not meet with the minister again in his office, because of course it's you break the trust, you don't treat them with respect. It makes sense that, because they said that they want to meet at a neutral ground, and a lot of people were upset with that, saying that, oh, you can't do this, or you have to meet the minister at his office. But indeed, the reason for them to ask for a meeting in the neutral ground was because of this sort of disregard in the first meeting. And then I think finally, on 25th, uh, yeah, on 25th of July, the union minister of education, sorry, the education minister, Dharmendra Pradhan, resigned. And that was one of the three or four demands of the CJP for this protest. Was one, the resignation of the education minister. Second was compensation to the families of students whose lives were lost due to the NEET exam leak. So that was the second point. And the third point, I think, was an overall reform of the education system, or at least work towards reform. And the first demand was met on 25th of July. The education minister resigned. And of course, it's important to note again, resignation of the education minister is not a solution. it is merely an ideological victory, but a very important one. It is a very important ideological victory. It is not going to change after Dharmendra Pradhan resigns. The person that replaces him is probably going to be just as bad or maybe worse. Who knows? But the fact that the BJP government, which boasts itself as a government that doesn't succumb to political pressure or it doesn't rely on this sort of resignation based system, um, they had to bow down to the power of the students. So in the last 10 years, if I'm not wrong, there was not a single resignation because of political pressure or because of scandals that the BJP no BJP minister has resigned because of scandals or because of political pressure in the last 10 years. And this is sort of a historic achievement. That's why I think the resignation plays a very big role in an ideological way, even though it may not have any direct consequences to the education system, but it is important. So the education, yes, change is possible. Yes, indeed, I think it's very important that this the whole cockroach Janta Party movement and the protest of the students, it tells you that if there is still power with the people. So if you stand for what's right, you stand together, there is hope for change. Yeah. So the first demand was met on 25th of July, and I think, yeah, on the same day after he resigned, you see visuals of Abhijit Dipke and everyone at the protest site just relieved and celebrating. And on the same day, there was a press conference where they accepted all three demands. So the first demand, of course, was already accepted, the resignation. The second was compensation for families of students who died. Um, oh yeah, and the third one I forgot about, FIRs that were registered against protesters. So they have to be withdrawn, and also no future FIRs against protesters, because I believe people who were at the protest site in a lot of BJP ruled states, there were FIRs against these peaceful protesters. So that was one demand which was also agreed upon by the government, that yes, we will drop all FIRs against these protesters, and there will be no future FIRs against any of the peaceful protesters of this movement. And I guess for the overall reform, there was commitment from the government that we will continue to have talks with CJP and continue to sort of discuss on what to change and how to change about the education system. So that was also very important. And I think one other aspect which I really liked was how, again, it's about solidarity. And there were at the protest site, um, there were people that were sending food from all over the country, even outside the country, sending food for the protesters, sending medicines, sending, you know, just to show some sort of help or solidarity towards the protesters. And that is, I think, also very gives you a lot of hope, and a lot of, yeah, a great sense of hope that uh, there are a lot of people behind this protest who support this movement. Um, Now, I think I would also maybe mention a few points about, from the other side, from the other perspective. So I was looking at a few debates. Oh wait, maybe I should also show this. Yeah, this article also talks about how it's not just about NEET, it's about general accountability, uh, compensation for lost time. Yeah, and this also talks about how the government must answer for the crimes against, or the police brutality that was inflicted upon peaceful protesting students. Yeah, I wanted to talk about some of the points that people bring up from the other perspective. So I've seen a few cases where people talk about foreign funding. There was this one debate where this spokesperson of the BJP said, it feels like this protest is funded by the deep state, or there are these deep state elements, or the CIA is funding this protest. And I feel like so not just this point, but a lot of other points that I have heard personally from made by the BJP spokespersons are all attempts to try and invalidate the protest, to try and delegitimize how important it is or how big this protest was, because there were people also making claims about why are there non-students at a protest, which of course doesn't make sense. You don't need to be a student to participate in a protest. You only need to care about what the students stand for. So also about foreign funding, I haven't seen any proof. At least there were some things about Sonam Wangchuk where he had his FCRA revoked, or there were some claims that he was funded by China. But again, even if we give in to the fact that let's say there was a lot of funding, a lot of foreign funding for these protests, well, you have to look at it in two ways. One, if that is true, if there was foreign funding and it led to such a big movement in the capital of India, isn't the home minister still accountable again? Like, if you have foreign elements that are trying to destabilize the country and they reach to such a big magnitude, it's still the home minister who is responsible or who has to be answerable. So even if we give in to these sort of foreign funding allegations, I think it really doesn't make any sense. And second part of it is, even if it's funded, the demands of the protesters and what they are trying to fight for are still valid. It doesn't invalidate any of that. So that is the first point. The second point I think people bring up was, like I said, these are not students who are protesting, and yeah, again, you don't need to be a student to stand for what students are standing for. You just need to be involved, because you had parents, you had people who have brothers or sisters or siblings who are going through the NEET examination or this sort of process. So really, it's not limited to students. And another debate, there was this discussion about how this is only a Delhi phenomena, and I think it was proved wrong very clearly towards the end, because you saw that it's not just in Delhi. It is very clearly a nationwide protest, because you had protesters in Mumbai, in Pune, Bangalore, in the northeast, in Bihar, everywhere. All major cities, there were people protesting. There were also protests outside of India. I think in Amsterdam, I don't remember which cities, but somewhere in the US. So again, to try and delegitimize the importance of this protest is not going to work, because it is a very big movement. It is very important, kind of historical when it comes to the youth coming together and speaking up. So yeah, those were the 2 points that I saw people make. Let me just check if I have any other notes that I have to talk about. No, I think that was it. Yeah, so this was not very, let's say, I tried to put together everything as I could, starting with the background of what's going on in the education system, to try and have as many references as I can. But yeah, I think I might make another video which goes into more detail of into all of these aspects with a lot of proof in terms of articles or reports and so on, so that I construct like this coherent video which goes from start to finish. So I think that was, fighting for our rights is important, but following certain norms is also necessary. That will make this movement stronger. Yeah, that makes sense. Because I think people were also mentioning how this movement doesn't seem to have a leadership which the people listen to, because people draw parallels to the Anna Hazare movement, where it was clearly very clearly revolving around the stage, and there was some sort of direction from the people on the stage. But I think here it is more sort of decentralized in terms of organization of how the protesters protested. It was not necessary. You didn't see sort of this idealization of Abhijit Dipke or the others. Um the students recognized that this is really something important for us, but they didn't idolize, and I think that's very important also to understand that to not idolize these people who stand for your movement, because I think that probably was one of the reasons why the Anna Hazare movement and Kejriwal that came out of it didn't have a very good, let's say, positive impact later on. Okay, I think I don't have any more points to talk about. Mm, yeah, that should be it. Okay, it was interesting. I was not going to stream, but my friend told me that no, you must stream. You were excited about it, so thanks for that motivation. So and I'll also make sure that I make a comprehensive video where I go into detail into all of these aspects. And yeah, I think again to some of the most important things to take away from this is that uh, people of all ages, wherever you are, whether you're in India or not, must realize that you need to start taking us seriously, and we know what we are doing, we know what we want, and we will stand for our rights. And I think it's this whole protest was a good proof of this idea. So I think that's also something to keep in mind. Okay, I think I shall in my stream now. That was sort of a heavy stream compared to my other streams, but hopefully I make more commentary about political content in the Indian YouTube space. Alright, I think that's gonna be it. I will end my stream now. Maybe I go live again uh, next week. Um, but yeah, that was it for now. Thanks, Rohit. Thank you.